responds to the death of one of the most vocal critics of the war, Alexei Navalny. The 47-year-old Russian opposition leader has died in prison, according to the country's prison service. Mr. Navalny was recognized internationally for risking his own life to stand up to Mr. Putin's regime. His cause of death is not yet known. Prison officials claim he died after going for a walk. Many world leaders on Friday condemned the Russian president for Navalny's death and for the years Navalny had spent in prison while his condition deteriorated.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality.
And we should hold Putin accountable for this, and no one should be in any doubt about the dreadful nature of Putin's regime in Russia.
Russia has serious questions to answer. Alexei Navalny has been a strong voice for freedom, for democracy for many years, and NATO and NATO allies have called for his immediate release for a long time.
The world has lost a freedom fighter in Alexei Navalny. We will honor his name. And in his name, we will stand up for democracy and for our values.
Putin does not care who dies, as long as he retains his position. And that is why he must not keep anything. Putin must lose everything. He must not retain anything. He must be held accountable for what he has done.
Well, we're also just hearing from former US President Barack Obama. He says that Navalny was a fearless advocate for his beliefs who died unbroken by the tyranny he opposed. He died in unyielding defense of his vision of a better future for his country, a vision and a courageous example that will never die. There's been an outpouring of grief for Navalny from around the world. People have come together at vigils, laying flowers and lighting candles next to photos of Navalny from Europe to South America to here in Washington. Hundreds of people gathered outside the Russian embassy in the US capital to pay respects to Navalny and to speak out against Putin. Vigils also took place in states from the former Soviet bloc, like this one in Georgia, as well as in Armenia and Lithuania. And in Russia, despite a stark warning from the Kremlin for Russians to avoid mass protests, people still showed up to pay their respects in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, visibly upset. Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg spoke with some of them.
First, my reaction was like, it's just a joke, it can be real. But then the news was coming more and more and more. And I was crying like for 1 hour.
What was your reaction when you heard the news about his death?
I was with my friends. I was broken. I really thought that it couldn't happen, like never.
Well, Maria Snegovaya is a senior fellow with the Europe, Russia and Eurasia program at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, and she joins us now. Maria, thanks for being with us on BBC News. President Biden, as we heard, clearly blames President Putin for Alexei Navalny's death. The UN says the state is responsible for the death of an inmate in custody. What's your reaction to the death of Alexei Navalny, as we've heard reported by Russian authorities?
Well, like most people worldwide, who certainly support the fight for freedom in case against tyranny and autocracy, I'm extremely heartbroken to hear this news. It's not completely unexpected for most of us who closely watched Russian politics, because unfortunately, since his return back to Russia in early in 2021, Navalny essentially has become a prisoner of Putin, a hostage. And there is even rumors that an effort to exchange Navalny for other, perhaps certain people, certain Russians that the Western policymakers were attempting, were rejected on the side of the Kremlin, because probably Kremlin wanted to hold Navalny under its control and eventually destroy Navalny.
Now, he was the leading opposition figure. With his death and so many other leaders either in exile or in prison, where does that leave the opposition movement in Russia, given elections are just a month away?
Well, honestly, nobody expected that this election will be anything remotely resembling the real elections. The only candidate who was running on an openly anti-war platform, Boris Nadezhdin, was just recently banned from running. It's clear that Putin feels very completely unpunished and not facing any resistance, any serious resistance. So he is getting rid of the opposition, including this horrible murder of Navalny. That is because he's feeling in control of the situation. Unfortunately, Russian opposition is in disarray. There's a lot of arguments, and most importantly, there is lack of hope, lack of this audacity of hope that Navalny was offering to many people in Russia and outside of Russia. In a lot of ways, Navalny was extremely creative, highly talented politician that Russia has never had. So in a lot of ways, he was completely unique and certainly courageous and heroic, as demonstrated by his return in Russia. And most importantly, his behavior in jail, when already imprisoned in Russia, he provided really inspirational, uplifting letters that he sent back to his supporters, which really served this source of hope. Right now, certainly, it's an extremely gloomy moment where it seems like both Russians inside the country and the world more broadly is just failing to contain the Russian regime, the horrible regime that unfortunately is spreading its deleterious influence outside of Russia and currently in Ukraine.
And just on that point, Maria, there's been much international outcry today, but what options are there for international leaders to do more than just share those words?
Yeah, absolutely. One and most important thing right now is support Ukraine, because as we see right now, the world clearly is divided into black and white, right? There is tyranny and this fight for freedom against tyranny, but we need to help Ukraine to do this fight, to pick up where Russians domestically, the pro-liberal minded Russians have left and where they failed. Unfortunately, I think we will probably, it's time to say that. And Ukrainians right now heroically try to stop Putin, his deleterious influence, and that's why all of the world that supports freedom needs to support Ukraine. It's really heartbreaking to see the situation with Ukraine package in Congress that's been stuck in the House these days.